These are the 2.3 notes for pre-calculus. We're talking about properties of graphs today. You did this back in Algebra 2, so this should be a little bit of a review, but we're going to write some things a little bit differently. So part A says find f of 3. So this is my x value, and I want to know what my y value is. So I go over to my graph. I identify right here that x is 3, and so my answer will be 2 for my y value. So you can just write an answer of 2. Let's look at part B. Find f of -8. Again, that's my x, and my goal is to figure out what my y is. So I go to -8 on my x, and I identify the y value that goes along with it as 6. The third one is just a little bit different. It's asking f of x is -6. That's actually my y value. So it's saying y equals -6. And then I'm trying to find the x. So y is -6 right here. And so my answer would be the x value that goes along with it, 7. The next part talks about domain and range. I'll clear this space. All right. So for the domain is your x's, left to right. So when I look at my x's, left to right, the smallest one I see is -8. And all the way along the graph, the largest one I see is +10. I'm going to write it in interval notation, which means I'm going to put a comma in the middle. And I'm going to use brackets around the outsides. For a domain, I always want to use brackets, at least for all the problems that we're going to work on in class. Now for the range. For the range, I'm going to go from the lowest point to the highest point on the graph. And this time I'm going to look at the y's. So the lowest y value I have is right here, -6. And the highest y value I have happens to be over here at +6. And just like domain, this one is always going to be brackets. For the next part, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. You have to be careful about whether to use parentheses or brackets. So parentheses are generally used for things that are not included, not part of the answer, and brackets are used for things that are included. So where is f of x positive? F of x is positive anywhere above the x-axis. So all of this part right here is positive. How do I write that? Well, I'm always going to use the x's, and I'm going to go from -8 all the way to right here, which is 4. So from -8 to 4. Now, notice they're asking where it's positive. This point up here is actually up in the positive region. It's above the line. So it is included. I use a bracket. But this point right here is on my yellow line. It's on my x-axis. So therefore, it's not really positive. Notice it's paired up with 0, which is not a positive number. So I'm going to say it's not included. I'm going to use a parenthesis. Let's take a look at the negative section. So for the negative section, I'm looking at anything that is below this line. So this little part right here. Right? So I'm still going to use my x's on this one. In fact, the range is the only time you use the y's. The negative goes from 4 all the way till 10. But 4 is paired with a 0, which means it's not included as part of your negative answer. Same with the 10. It's paired with a 0. So to simplify it, anytime you have a number, a dot that is above or below, it gets a bracket. Anytime you have something that's on the line, it'll get a parenthesis. All right, let me erase this and we'll keep moving. For the next part, it's talking about increasing and decreasing. And when we talk about increasing, we mean going uphill. which is different than positive. Positive is above the line, increasing is uphill. So my graph looks like it's increasing just in this little area over here. So we're going to say that's from 7 to 10. The good thing about this part is when you say from 7 to 10, increasing and decreasing are always going to be parentheses, because it can't be increasing when the graph hasn't really gotten started yet. So increasing and decreasing, always going to be parentheses. Domain and range, always going to be brackets. Only the positive and negative do you have to decide whether you use brackets or parentheses. All right, where's my graph decreasing? Well, let's take a look. I've got this little section here is decreasing, and then this little section here. And I'm going to write that as two separate things. I'm going to go from -8 to -4. We said always parentheses. And then from 3 to 7. From -8 to 4, and from 3 to 7, decreasing. This little section here in the middle is what we would call a constant. It's a flat, has a slope of 0, so that would be considered a constant interval. All right, now for the x-intercepts. We've already talked about intercepts. Intercepts is anywhere where it's crossing the axis. So if we want to work on our x-intercepts, it's going to be anywhere that crosses this line. I see 2 points here, 4, 0, and here, 10, 0. And you can give the full point for these. You don't have to just say 4, 10. You would say 4, 0, and 10, 0. Now the y-intercepts. Anywhere where it crosses this line here down the middle. I only see one place at 0, 2. And again, you just write down the full name of that point, 0, 2. For the next part, the local maximums and minimums. Local maximums just means it has to be a high point in the area. So I want you to think about these as peaks. And then the local minimum is a low point in the area. I want you to think about those as valleys. As I go back to my graph, let's identify those peaks and valleys. So in order for something to be a peak, it has to be going uphill at first and then downhill. Anything that's a cliff that doesn't go uphill and downhill is not considered a maximum. So this is not a maximum. It would need to go up first before it came down. So that is not a maximum value. Same thing with this 3, 2. Going straight across and then down isn't good enough. It would have to go up and then down. Same thing with this 10. It's going up, but we don't know if it's coming down. So we're not able to count that either. So for this one, we would just say that there are no local maximums. Let's look for our minimums, our valleys. So in order for something to be a valley, it has to be going down and then up. This is my local minimum. That point right there, notice how it's going down and then up. Nothing else really works. You might think about that one, the -4, 2, but again, it goes down, but it doesn't come back up. So my only value, my only minimum is 7, -6. And you can just name the entire point. And then my last part asks me, how many times does the line y equals -3 intersect the graph? Y equals -3 is a horizontal line that crosses the y-axis at -3. So I'm going to go up to my graph here, erase some of this stuff. I'm going to draw a horizontal line at -3. 1, 2, 3. And then we just look at the graph and see how many times the blue line crosses our graph. It looks like it crosses once right here and another time right there. So your answer would just be twice, or 2. So at this point, I would probably pause the video, flip your notes over, try the back side. Anything that you're stuck on, you can kind of fast forward through the notes, and that way you're just getting the information on the ones you're stuck on. F of -5, here's -5, so your y value is 2. F of 4, I'm looking for where it's x, and I want the y that goes along with it. Here's the x, there's my y. This time on part C, I'm looking for where this is y. I'm looking for y is 4, and I want the x value. So y is 4 right here, and then my x value corresponds to 0. All right. For the domain, it's your x's left to right. And we're always going to use brackets for the ones we're doing in class. So the furthest to the left is -10 for the x. The furthest to the right is 8. Range is your y's, low to high. The lowest point I see is -8, and the highest point I see is 4. -8 to 4. Your x-intercepts, anywhere where it crosses your x-axis, here. That would be -8, 0. Name the entire thing like an xy pair. And 7, 0. Your y-intercepts, that was a terrible line. That's better. All right, your y-intercept would be 0, 4. Again, name it as the entire xy point. All right, then it's asking for where your graph is positive. Positive is anywhere above your x-axis. So this is kind of going to be the line that you're looking at. Any section above that is going to be positive. So starting here and going all the way like this is all positive. And it's one big section. So I'm going to start at -8 and go all the way to 7. -8 to 7. And then for positive and negative, you have to decide whether it's going to be brackets or parentheses. Because both of these points are on the line, they are not technically part of your positive region. So we're going to use a parenthesis to show that. Where is your graph negative? All right, your graph is negative anywhere below the x-axis. So you have this little section over here and this little section over here. So I'm going to go from the points -10 to -8 and from 7 to 8. Then look, at -10, this point is actually down in the negative area. So I'm going to put a bracket. But the 8 point is sitting at the 0 line. On the line, it gets a parenthesis. Over here on the 7 is on the line. It's not really negative, so I'm going to put a parenthesis. But down here at this point, 8, it is down in the negative section. It's paired with a negative number. I'm going to give it a bracket. The next one are your local maximums and minimums. Your local maximum is any peak. And I do believe I have 2 of them here. I have this point, 0, 4, as well as 6, 3 are my maximums. And you name the entire point, 0, 4, and 6, 3. For your local minimum, you're looking for any valley. So even though this point over here is a low point, it doesn't count because it's not going down and up. The only minimum you have is 4, 1. This one, this is kind of a cliff, so it would not count as a minimum. So that would be 4, 1. All right, for our increasing and decreasing, we're going to name the entire section from the x to the x where it is increasing. So it looks like there are two places that are increasing. First, this section right here going uphill, and then this little section going uphill there. We're always going to use parentheses for our increasing. So from -10 to 0 and from 4 to 6. From -10 to 0 and from 4 to 6. For decreasing, anywhere that it's going downhill. So from 0 to 4 and from 6 to 8. From 0 to 4 and from 6 to 8. The last two questions ask, how many times does a line y equals 1 intersect the graph? Now, a y equals line is a horizontal line. I'm just going to go up and draw that line through my graph. Y equals 1 would be here. I'm just going to go straight across. And that looks like it intersects it 3 times. Once right here, another time right here, and then a third time right here. So your answer would be 3. How many times does a line x equals -3 intersect the graph? Well, an x equals line is a vertical line. So if we look at our graph, -3 would be 1, 2 here at -3 on my x-axis. And you can see that it just crosses it 1 time.